Okay, everybody. For those of you who don't know, my name is Michael Forrest, and welcome to I.M.POSSIBLE. Now, before we get going, I'm going to ask if you guys can stay off of this top step right here. This way, nobody really blocks this display, and it gives me a little bit of room to move around and do the whole presentation hosting thing, right? Now, before we get going, if I can direct your attention to your menu wheel on your lower left, you can notice at the very top of that menu wheel is a microphone icon. Ordinarily, when that microphone is clear, that means that we can hear what's happening in your environment. So we've gone ahead and we turned to red, and this way, if somebody comes into your space and says, "Hey, are you still on that thing?" we're not going to be able to hear that, so feel free to answer them. Also, likewise, if you have like maybe a barking dog in the background or something happening like that, you're not going to face social ruin back at the campfire by becoming known as the avatar and suddenly start barking during the event, right? Now, you'll also notice that you have a pink cheek smiley face emoji in your menu wheel, and when you press on it, your emoji panel opens up before you in the air, kind of floating there, giving you a lot of options to express yourself. So if somebody says something deep and meaningful, and you're feeling it, it starts to resonate with you right here. You can show them some love and just let it out and go like that. Maybe somebody shares a story where they swing across some quicksand, Tarzan style, right? And you're impressed. You can throw up the applause, right? Maybe they ask you a yes or no question. You can say yes like this, or maybe you just feel like smiling because maybe the story is resonating with you, right? Maybe somebody's telling a sad story and you're feeling it. You feel a little bit down, you can just let that out. Maybe they ask you a question like, "Can you guys hear me?" And you guys say no, but then they're like, "Wait, how did they hear the question?" Weird, right? Okay, so maybe somebody's telling a funny story that you can do the silly face here like this to show that you're laughing. And then there's this. This is not how you ask a question. This is not how you get on the list. This is how you get my attention in the event that something is wrong. Like, for example, say I'm waving my hands around and it looks like I'm talking, but you're not hearing me. That's a good time to do that. Or maybe this display catches on fire. And listen, I know we didn't really, choose a good slide for that bit right here because, it looks like it's in flames. But in general, because that actually has happened, our moderators once that are set on fire because they have a good sense of humor, and we used to give them Terraformer for special effects, and that's why we don't do that anymore. But we still remember it because we got the fire right here, right? You could also press the X in the middle of that panel to close it, but it's a good idea to leave these panels open during these kind of events because it's a really great way to provide feedback for each other, and it's also a good way to let people around you know what you're experiencing. So if I'm telling a funny story and I see people going like this, I know they think it's funny. And you may not agree. You may be like, "That's not funny at all. I'm going to just stand over here," and you can totally do that. This is VR. All right, now, what's I.M.POSSIBLE all about? Well, we started I.M.POSSIBLE a few months ago, and it was supposed to be a one-time thing. So we were only going to do it this one time because we thought the world is kind of a negative place. We wanted to inject some positivity into it, and we were thinking that maybe somebody would show up here who's facing something difficult in their life, like maybe they're in a difficult relationship, or maybe they're facing a tough assignment at work or at school, and we thought that maybe help inspire somebody to break on through to just pass that obstacle that they're facing, because you never know what stories are going to move or touch you or inspire you and stuff like that. So we just we thought we'd give it a shot, and it worked out really well because in the beginning I described how I got a long history with this word. I can't stand this word actually, because the word isn't what people think it means. I recently read that impossible is just a word that we use for something we haven't done yet, right? And in my own history, the way I first became acquainted with this word, it was when I was a kid. I was being, pursued one summer by these bullies in the neighborhood, right? And they would, chase me down into this alleyway every day, and they beat me up, and they tell me not to resist. I try to fight back, and day after day they keep telling me, it's impossible. You're never gonna get away from this. It's gonna happen to you every day. You just better get used to it. And slowly I started getting used to it because I believed in that word. I believed in the power of words. I thought it meant what I thought it meant. I thought it meant when they said it was impossible, that meant it couldn't be done, right? So every day this would happen. Now, my dad had he owned a bar at the time, and he one day a guy comes into the bar, and the guy goes to settle out his bill, and he says he says to my dad, he goes, "Do you have any kids at home?" Right? And my dad says, "Yeah, I got two boys at home." So he picks up a bag and he puts it on the bar, and my dad looks in the bag thinking this is going to be a huge tip. It's a sack of money, and he looks inside, and it's not. It's a stack of comic books, right? And then a whole stack of Batman comics, right? And so my dad brings them home for us, and he slides them onto my bedroom door one night, and I looked at them like, "What is this?" And I didn't read this like a kid typically reads a comic. I read this like it was an instruction manual, right? And what I did was I modified a backpack, and in the side of that backpack, I filled the side pocket with all these kind of marbles and stuff. And what happened was, the next day when the bullies were chasing me down that alleyway, right? I reached back and I pulled on that drawstring I made, and all the marbles, they clanked out all over the pavement. They were bouncing all over the place, and I kept running. And for the first time ever, I made it to the garages, right? And I climbed up there, I scrambled up onto the wall, I got up onto the garage, and I looked down back over the alleyway. And what I saw, right, was all these kids on the ground, right? And I just started giggling. But then suddenly I stopped because I realized I had just done what they said could not be done. I had just done what they said was impossible, right? And then I realized this word doesn't mean what people think it means, and people had to know. So what I did was I went to the library. I mean, I'm more like, maybe like, 10, 12 years old, something like that. And, I went to, about 10 years old. And I went to the library and I found every dictionary I could. And what I did was I actually, statute of limitations is up, so I can confess this now, right? What I did was I actually blacked out the word impossible in every dictionary in that building, right? At least the ones I can get my hands on, right? Because I thought, this word doesn't mean what people think it means. And ever since then, when I heard the word impossible, I don't believe it. Right now, listen, if you guys have a story of your own or a story you've read or a story of someone you know that you'd like to share with us, please keep in mind we are filming this event. So if it's a personal story, just tell me to cut it out and we'll do that. That's no problem. But if you want to share something like that, you absolutely can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And what you do is you raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button on your lower right that just appeared as if by magic. And what you can do is, this way, if you have something you'd like to share with us, you just press that button, you get on a list, all right? And since pauses are the natural enemy of the All Space event host, if there's nobody on that list, I'll just keep going with stories like that. All right, so let's see what we have here. I don't see anybody on the list yet, so yeah, I'm gonna keep on going. But if you do want to get on that list, just press that raise hand button in your lower right, and we'll take you at the next pause, okay? So anyway, let's see. The next one I'm going to go with is one of my favorites, and this is about in the early days of the U.S. There was this miner, and he came into the possession of a gold mine, right? At least he had hoped it was a gold mine. And every day he went there and he kept on, working that mine. At the end of every day, he'd go into town, he'd go to this saloon that was there, and he'd, have a drink, and he'd kind of unwind a little bit, talk with some of the locals. And every single day, this guy comes up to him and asks him, "Hey, listen, I'm willing to take that mine off your hands if you like. I'm willing to buy it. Give you a good price for it too." And the guy says, "There's no way I'm ever going to sell this. This is a gold mine. I'm certain. I can feel it in my bones that there's gold in there." Right? And every single day he'd come into that saloon and he'd look a little bit more beat up, a little bit more tired, a little bit more haggard. He'd get more and more discouraged. And one day he had one of those days, and I'm sure you've all had them, one of those days where every single thing that could go wrong does. His pickaxes were breaking, his dynamite fuses were wet, nothing was going right. Okay, it was, cave in earlier that day, just everything was going wrong. And so what he did was he goes into that saloon and he sees that guy, and before the guy could even ask, he says, all right, I'll sell it to you. All right, and he sold him the mine. 2 days later, the old miner goes into that bar and the saloon rather, and he says, he sees the guy celebrating. And he's like, well, what's the occasion? I mean, he's buying everybody drinks. He's all happy. And he says, what's the occasion? And the guy says, well, that mine you sold me, it had gold in it. We hit gold today, right? And the old miner, he goes, I got to know, how close was I? And the guy says, well, I only dug about 3 feet. All right. So for the rest of that miner's life, every single time he thought, he was about to give up, and every single time he thought something was impossible and not going to happen, every single time he was discouraged, he would always tell himself, I'm just 3 feet from gold. And life is like that. When you're facing an obstacle, right, very often it's in that last few moments when you're about to give up, where those last few moments, if you keep going, if you keep pushing, that's typically usually the place where you're going to break through, the place where all the things that you thought were impossible suddenly become possible. All right. Now, if anybody has any story like this or one of your own where you've achieved something you didn't think, listen, it doesn't even have to be in the real world. It can be in VR. Like if, for example, like the world that we're standing here, the Ravenhall Forum, right? When this was being built, we said that word impossible, right? Many times when we were doing it, because we built this on an Apple iPad and a laptop that was only capable of running Unity for 15 minutes at a time before it crashed, right? And along the way, we didn't think it could be done. And a lot of people told us we didn't have the right tools. We couldn't do it. But now we have the Ravenhall Forum where we can gather together under the stars and share these kind of stories. It's pretty neat, and we enjoy it. We hope you like it too. Also we had, and since at the time I didn't have a computer when I started working on this, I thought it'd be cool to end our events by having one of our hovercrafts. I don't know if you've tried them at the Ravenhall Flight Academy. You've got these ships, right? We thought it'd be cool if we could end our events by having them fly in, right? And I started working on this without a computer. I finally did get a computer and I managed to finish it. But that's what these buttons right here do. At the end of our events, we push one of these buttons and the ship flies in. And, a lot of it along the way, didn't think I could do it, but I kept telling myself, 3 feet from gold, man. keep pushing, just 3 feet from goal, right? And eventually, we got there, and now we got a special effect that people seem to enjoy. All right, now, if anybody has any stories, they want to get on that list, just press that raise hand button. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on going. All right, this next one I'm going to share is about a couple that they had a small boy about 4 years old, and at the age of 4, he could already speak 3 languages. All right, he was a real impressive kid. His parents were really proud of him. But then, gradually they started to notice that the boy started slurring his words, and he started bumping into stuff around the house, and he just started school. He was getting in fights with other children, and that wasn't like him at all. Right. And so, of course, they took him to the doctor, and initially the doctor said, said, well, you guys travel a lot, because they did for the father's work. He might have picked up some kind of a parasite or something. So they started doing all these tests. And eventually, they came to find out he had this disease I've got no business trying to pronounce. All right, it's commonly known as ALD. Right. And what happened was they told him, they said, all right, listen, there's no cure for this. All right. And, your son's, not going to make it past a couple of years. And here's a number of a support group that you can contact and basically, come to terms with this and go home and spend as much time with your son as you can. And they sent them home to watch their son to die. But you see, the parents, they said no. They refused to accept it. And the doctor said, listen, I don't think you understand. Right. They even had the support group come to their house and try to convince them. And they refused to accept it. They said, there's no way this is going to happen. We're not going to let it. Right. So what they did was, now keep in mind, they only had a high school education with regard to math and science and all that. But they went into these libraries, and eventually they got into these medical libraries, and they started doing all this research. And the doctor's like, listen, you're just a couple of lay people. You haven't gone through the training, and there's no way you're going to do this. But they kept on reading, they kept on researching, and kept on looking for solutions. They read about all this, animal testing and all this kind of stuff. And as they did this, what happened was they eventually became aware of this oil that has a quality of separating, these fat lipids from the blood. And so they started adding these oils to the son's food, and gradually, over time, right? What happened was that they kept having the son's blood tested periodically, while the doctors would say, "All right, we'll test it again, but really, you guys got no business trying to do like science." But gradually, they learned the language of math, of science, of chemistry. And gradually they kept on testing this. And gradually what happened was they noticed that the progression of the disease was slowing. All right. It was slowing down. So the parents, what they did was they started contacting all these chemists. Now, you keep in mind, this was in the mid-'80s, at the early days of the internet. There was no real email for most people. So they were doing this through letter writing and phone calls. And they contacted over 100 chemists. And one day they came across one of their letters lands on the desk of a chemist. It was his last day of work. He was about to retire. He was done. And he opened up this letter and he read it, and it touched him so deeply. He says, you know what? I'm going to stay on. And he wrote the guy back, and he says, listen, I'll make this oil for you. All right. I'll refine it. I'll produce it, and we're going to have to call it something. And so they named it after his son, Lorenzo. It became known as Lorenzo's oil. They even made a movie about it, and what happened was he kept giving him this oil now that when he got it. And the son lived to about 28 years old, where he died of pneumonia, from which arose from complications of damage that was done by disease early on because they didn't catch it early enough. And during those 28 years, the parents didn't stop there. All right, they spread awareness of the oil, even though the medical industry was telling them, this is quack medicine, this is bad science, and they kept trying to fight them along the way. But anytime they became aware of somebody who had the markers in the blood for this, they would give them this oil. And, most of them are still around. All right. So just because they refused to accept this, their son got to live a lot longer. And the course of a lot of other people's lives, thousands of people's lives, actually changed just because they became aware, all right, of this oil, which was a direct result of the parents saying no. All right. And sometimes just refusing to accept something, just refusing to accept that word impossible is enough to keep you going. All right. So now, if anybody has any questions they would like to, ask, or if they have any stories they'd like to share, or if if they or somebody they know have achieved something that they themselves or people around them didn't think they could do, or maybe perhaps it's a story you read or something you did in VR, like you built a world that you didn't think you could. You just press that raise hand button. I see we got one. Let's see who we have here. We have a little tight. Oh, just disappeared. You press that raise hand question again. We'll get you back on the list there. Let's see there. So, but yeah, if anybody has any stories they'd like to get on that list there, you just press that raise hand button in your lower right. Okay, I see it's back. Little Tyke, you have something for us? You're on the air. Where are you, Little Tyke? I don't see you.
So do
There.
you work for the the game? This is sort of off topic. I was wondering.
I volunteer for the for Allspace. It means I do a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
work, an insane amount of work. I struggle every day. I reach impossible goals. But yeah, no, I do a lot of work for
Nice.
them, but I don't get paid for it. So I'm pretty much a volunteer. I'm a regular user, just like you. Anyone can do it, and having events in all spaces. Pretty much something
Great.
anyone can do.
Yeah.
You know.
Thanks.
All right. So let's see if we have anybody else. Let's see. I just saw the number go on, but that was still you. We'll text. Never mind. Okay. Let's see. All right, so since there's nobody on the list, I'm going to keep on going. All right, this next one is the very first time that the U.S. was in the Olympics for the discus event. They did a lot of training hoping that make a good showing, right? And what happened was, 1 second, I saw one appear and disappear. Okay, never mind. But yeah, they were hoping they were going to make a good showing because there was, they wanted. There was the very first time they were doing this discus event. And what happened was they would train really hard and they would compare themselves against the known records, and they weren't coming anywhere close. And they're like, oh, you know what? We're just going to embarrass ourselves. So they trained harder and they kept on pushing. And while they were improving a little bit, right? They weren't coming anywhere near these records, right? And they're worried about it. They're like, we're gonna embarrass our country. This isn't cool. What are we gonna do? So, but they, rather than not show up, they figured we're just gonna stick it out and take what comes, right? Maybe some kind of miracle. Who knows what'll happen? So what they did was they went to the event and they submitted their equipment to the Olympic Committee, and the Olympic Committee said you can't use these. These discs aren't they're not regulation. They're not the proper weight. That you can't use these. And they're like, oh no, what do we do? And they said, don't worry, we'll give you some discs that you can use and you can still compete. So they gave them some discs and they went to the practice field to warm up and they figured, we'll use these discs and see how they do. And just in the practice, all of a sudden the crowd started to focus on these people warming up because they were, even in practice, they weren't competing yet, but they were completely shattering like the known records. What they had previously thought was the limits of human potential, they were exceeding by leaps and bounds. And the reason was because the regulation discs were much lighter than the ones that they had been training with. I mean, and back then, it wasn't common practice to use heavier weights. Now it is because of this event. Now that people train with heavier weights, training discs is a matter of course. But then it wasn't known. So that that day they won every medal you could think of, and they rewrote the record books that day, and they achieved what people thought wasn't possible. All right, now if anybody has a story that they would like to share, it could be their own, or it could be a story of someone they know, or it could be something they've read about, or something that they've done in VR that they didn't think could be done, like building a world when you didn't think it was possible, and you're happy with the results. Just let us know about it, and just by pressing that raise hand button in your lower right there. Now, let's see. I'm going to share one that's from my own life here. There was when in my late teens, I started getting in hiking, and camping, and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have all the equipment, but I was really looking for some hiking boots. But I used these steel toe construction boots instead because they looked like hiking boots, right? So I figured, I looked like a hiker, so doing the part. My friend Chris and I went up to upstate New York to this lake. It's called Lake George, and they had like a real rainy season one year, and it'd been raining for like a month. And we go up there thinking, it's a great time to go camping. We'd heard that there was all these waterfalls feeding into the lake because of all the rains, and we were going to go explore them. So we hike around the lake, and we go up onto one of these waterfalls, and we're just messing around like kids do, right? And all of a sudden, Chris slips on a rock, and he falls down, and the water carries him right into my legs and knocks me over. I fall down right behind him, and the two of us just explode off the top of this waterfall, and we fall straight down into the water, a big splash. It was only about 12 feet. We were totally fine. We came up out of the water. We were laughing. It was funny. But then when we tried to get back onto the bank, it wasn't so funny because all of a sudden this mud started coming down, and just like wall size. I still remembered it was like this big, coming down over us. All this mud, we just couldn't get a handhold or a foothold, and we couldn't get back up on the shore. And we're treading water, and we look, and I see that there's a boulder across the side of the lake, and you can see our tents. And I was like, our campsite's right over there. Why don't we just swim for it? No big deal. We're both good swimmers, so let's do it. So Chris says, okay. So we start swimming. About halfway across the lake, Chris calls out to me. I stop swimming, I tread water. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, Mike, I don't think I'm gonna make it. Right? And I look back and I realize, if we get back to that waterfall again, we're still not gonna have any way to get back on shore. Right? And, I look back to where the boulder is and I realize we're about halfway there. It's the same distance either way, but one destination has, active equipment. We don't know what's going to happen if we go there. So talking them really quickly to keep on going, right? And along the way, I started thinking, I'm not going to make it, and Chris is falling further and further behind. And, I'm yelling out words of encouragement and, and I think, all right, well, this is it. This isn't going to happen. All right. And just then, all of a sudden, Chris calls out and he goes, we got to do this. It's not going to end like this. And he goes, dig in, dig deeper. And he keeps on push. And he thought it was like a Rocky movie. He was like, the old coach from Rocky was yelling out all that stuff. And it was really motivating. And I started, digging in. And I don't know if you ever swam in steel toe construction boots, but you don't go in a straight line. You kind of go like at an angle and you kind of drag yourself there little by little. And by the time, and I know you're thinking, well, why don't you just take off the boots, Mike? Well, in the thick of it, and plus, breaking camp with no shoes on and then driving home like that, I was looking forward to that. And in that kind of situation, you don't always think clearly. Looking back, I should have just taken off the boots, and faced the snakes that were back at the camp. But yeah, so what happened was, I'm digging in, we're pushing, we're encouraging each other. And eventually we get to that boulder and we pull ourselves out of the lake, really, just drag on and collapse straight down onto that boulder there. And we laid there for about an hour recovering. Neither one of us said a word. And all of a sudden, Chris said, we did it. Just like that. And, we stayed an extra day, right, just to, recover from it. And, and we were okay, but a lot of times when you don't think you can do something, you actually can, So if anybody has any stories like this that they'd like to share, where they themselves have overcome a difficult situation or someone they know, has overcome, something difficult, or so they've done something in VR that they didn't think could be done, then, by all means, just press that raise hand button because we've got time for at least one more because I'm fresh out. That's my material for this week. Usually we have always a bit more involved, but that's okay. That's cool. Listen, if you've enjoyed today's event at all, right, understand that, as I said before, we don't get paid to do this. And if you go to altvr.com and you go up to where it says channels in the upper left, you're going to notice that it says one of all the Allspace event channels that are listed there. You'll see Ravenhall events all the way down on the bottom, right? You'll see us down there. If you press on that, you get taken to our event page. And if you could just press on that subscribe button, it helps us out a lot. It lets Allspace know that you enjoy our content. It also makes us feel good. If you enjoyed today, it's a great way to say thank you. Now, typically we end our events by taking everybody flying. Right. And usually on that landing pad there, we usually have like a drone floating there with a teleporter coming down. And I always thought it would be cool if we could have, a drone fly in, at the end of our events and, drop down one of these teleporters. And they had said, that wasn't possible with the equipment that I had. So I started working on it and we made some breakthroughs. And now we have these buttons here. And when you press one of these buttons, one of our Talon hovercrafts, if you've ever been to the Ravenhall Flight Academy where we teach everyone to fly, you can actually fly these things around, all right? And you're gonna see one of them right now. What we're gonna do is we're gonna press that button and a Ravenhall Talon hovercraft is gonna come up over this wall here, right? It's gonna rise up into the air. It's gonna fly right across the forum, right? And it's gonna touch down on that landing pad over there and it's gonna pop out one of those little, teleporters right at the bottom, right? And it's a pretty cool effect. And then we're gonna walk into it and then, we can go flying and stuff. And before we head out, listen, if you guys want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at __Uncanny Valley, right? And yeah, if you could subscribe to our event channel, we'd really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm going to push this button and announce we're going to play. And I'm going to unmute everybody because this way, if everybody wants to, say, oh, wow, I get to hear all that stuff, right? So here we go. All right, pressing the button now.
Ravenhall Talon aircraft en route to your position. Please stay clear of the landing pad.
Check it
Thank
out.
you.
That wall. Over there. Wait, we'll take questions at the Academy. Don't miss it. Look over there. Here it comes. I know, right? It's cool. There it is. Look up. You're going to miss it. There we go. Awesome. There we go. It's coming down now. And if anybody does have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at the Ravenhall Flight Academy. Just come on up here. And well, again, I'll take your question at the
Talon
Academy.
aircraft is now boarding for transport to the Ravenhall Flight Academy.
Now,
please step into the blue light. Thank
you for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it. You've been a great audience, and I'll see you at the Ravenhall Flight Academy. You can join us there. Otherwise, please remember, while I don't believe in the word impossible, I do believe in all of you. See you next time.